When we think about the daily prayer in Islam, Salat, it's easy to see it as just this beautiful spiritual act. And it is, but it's also incredibly structured. It's not just random, there's a real framework behind it. So let's dive into the essential rules that really shape this core act of worship. So let's get right to the heart of it. What makes a prayer count? I mean, really, what are the things that have to be in place for it to be considered valid? This isn't some big philosophical mystery. Actually, Islamic tradition gives us a super clear, practical checklist. And that's exactly what we're going to walk through step by step. All right, first things first. Before we can even get into the how of prayer, we got to cover the who, right? Who is actually required to do this? Because, and this is important, the obligation doesn't apply to every single person at every single moment of their lives. So let's break down these specific criteria. And here they are, laid out nice and simple. There are really three core requirements. You have to be a Muslim, you have to be sane or of sound mind, and you have to have reached the age of puberty. That's it. These three things create the baseline. They define who is formally held accountable for performing the daily prayers. Okay, so what about kids then? You see children praying with their families all the time, right? Well, this is seen as a time for learning and building good habits. It's like practice. It's not a formal, binding obligation where they're held accountable. It's all about getting familiar and comfortable with the practice. And the framework is really practical, too. It accounts for real-life situations. So there are some specific temporary exemptions. For example, women are excused from the daily prayers during menstruation and during postpartum bleeding. This isn't an afterthought. It's a recognized, built-in part of the rules. It's basically a temporary pause from that obligation. Okay, so we've nailed down who is obligated to pray. Now, let's shift gears to the next big piece of the puzzle. What has to be in place for the prayer to even be considered valid in the first place? You can think of these as the absolute, non-negotiable prerequisites. And here we have them, the 5 big conditions for a valid prayer. Let's run through them. 1. You've got to be praying at the correct time. 2. You need to have ritual purity. 3. Physical cleanliness, that means your body, your clothes, and the place you're praying. 4. Covering your body properly. And 5. Facing the Qibla, the direction of the Kaaba in Mecca. The key thing here, all 5 of these have to be met. It's an all or nothing kind of deal for the prayer to be valid. Now, that second point, ritual purity, is super important to understand. It's not just about, having washed your hands with soap. It's a specific state of spiritual cleanliness. And you achieve it through a very specific washing process. This could be the lesser ablution, called wudu, or in certain situations, it requires a full bath, known as ghusl. And again, just to highlight how practical these rules can be, there are even exceptions built in. Take that last condition, facing the Qibla. Well, that requirement can actually be relaxed in certain situations. Say, if someone is in a state of fear, or maybe they're traveling on a plane or a train and just can't figure out the exact direction. The rules account for that. Okay, this next part is really, really important because it's a distinction that can trip people up. We need to talk about the difference between conditions, which we've just been discussing, and pillars. They might sound kind of similar, but trust me, in the structure of the prayer, they play totally different roles. This chart just lays it out so clearly. Think of it like this. Conditions are the external prerequisites. They're the things you have to get sorted out before you even begin praying. On the other hand, pillars are the internal parts of the prayer itself, the actual actions like bowing and prostrating. So timing is key. Conditions have to be in place before and during the prayer. Pillars only happen during it. And here's the real kicker, the consequence. If you miss a condition, the whole prayer is invalid. Game over, you have to start again. But if you miss a pillar, sometimes it can be corrected. So if you want a simple way to remember it, think of it like this. The conditions are what make the prayer valid in the first place, while the pillars are the actual essential parts of the prayer itself. All right, so let's quickly recap the key takeaways here. First, we know that prayer is an obligation for Muslims who are sane and have reached adulthood. Second, for that prayer to even count, it absolutely depends on meeting those 5 key preconditions. And finally, the big distinction to remember, conditions are the before and pillars are the during. It's that simple. And all of this kind of leaves us with a bigger question to think about, doesn't it? It shows that this detailed framework isn't meant to be restrictive. Instead, it provides this clear, focused path for a really profound spiritual practice. So it makes you wonder, not just in this context, but in any spiritual practice or discipline, how do rules and structure actually provide a framework that can deepen our faith and experience?